So Amudi, we went through quite a big chunk of story of your life where you have a huge experience of doing work with different organizations in different scenarios within different stakeholders. So right now, what I want to ask is that you have seen a lot of different kinds of learning scenarios. You have worked with different people, चाहे वो government हो, non-profit हो या जो भी. Uh, what is your take on learning? And I want to understand from the perspective of children. You have made a lot of observations. How can you explain, or how do you think that the children naturally or actually
I feel
learn?
children are human beings, and human beings learn naturally and spontaneously. And that is the nature of all living beings, whether plant or animal or human. So that's our first underpinning of, to go from here. And if we start with this as an assumption, then all we need to do is to create an environment where this can happen. So we're not artificially motivating children, making education fun and games, because then the assumption is children don't like to learn. Even in alternative education programs, they want to make it, fun and games. And so we have to motivate, activate, and all that. Why? Because that assumption is children don't like to learn. But if we say that children want to learn from their environment, from what you started actually, the question, they want to learn everything. And the world is wonderful for them, full of wonder. And we put the hurdles there. So children want to learn about the natural world. They want to learn about what all human beings have developed. We call it supra nature, that what human beings have built over nature, with nature, over nature. And children are interested in that. So what have human beings developed? They've developed writing, they've developed reading, they've developed songs, they've developed music, mathematics. All that children want to learn because they see it around them. And that's why we now, when they work with our phones, mobile phones, we think why are they doing it? But because that's there and they see us using it. If we don't use it, they're not going to bother about it. So that's our starting point. So how children learn, I feel it varies according to ages. And suppose you see a birth to 6-year-old child, their hands are all the time moving. They want to hold, touch this. So I feel they learn through their hands. And that takes it to the mind. As they work. So when they're touching a glass or touching something, they're feeling the texture, the size, the proportions of it. And so that's one way of learning. Aristotle talked about it, saying that there are 3-4 stages for that sensorial kind of impression to become part of the mind, or become a concept, or become abstract. So in a sense, the first step is when you see a glass here in front of you. You see it, there's a picture, you can touch it. Not a picture, it's a real thing. We touch it, we can feel it, we can taste it, we can bite it. It's there. And so that's the first stage. The second stage is it's not here in front of you. And so then if you say, tell a child, get a glass, he's not going to go and get a pencil. He may get a wrong glass, but he will get a glass. Some kind of a glass. So that's the next stage where the child has a picture in the mind of that particular glass maybe. And he'll get that. The next stage is when the child or any human being also. The next stage of abstraction or arriving at a concept or learning is to, even when it's not there, you have a Even if there's a picture that's there, it's also in the tissues of the brain. But after the next stage is when the glass can be anything. It can be made of ceramic, it can be made of steel, it can be made of this. So that from the specificity, it goes to a general. That is that abstraction. And they can apply it anywhere. So I'll give you an example of my sister's granddaughter. She was about 2 years old. And she must have seen a waste paper basket in her house. She knew the use of it. And then we were in a party and outside in the lawn, and many people were there. And there was a buffet, kind of a tea or something. And then there was this huge big bin made of metal. And suddenly she discovered that it was a waste paper basket. So she wanted to test it out. So she took tissue paper from everybody, ran and put it there. One by one, she must have made at least 15 trips. Everybody's tissue paper was over. And so she sat next to that bin, dug up some mud, picked up some leaves and put it there. Because suddenly for her, it was that process of abstracting. That not only that is a waste paper basket, this is also a waste paper basket. So I think this process continues, for everything. So from the sensory kind of a touch to an abstraction. Very often teachers call just writing abstraction. But children write all the time, but they haven't abstracted a concept. Even the 10 or number 10, they're saying 1 and 0 is 10. But is that 10? That's not 10. Yeah. In different languages, we write 10 differently. But 10 is a quantity. So from that quantity to come to this 1 and 0, 10, which children go through, I feel. And we have to give that time.
And can you talk a little bit about how Montessori, who was a doctor, finally arrived as a teacher? I mean, how that changed? I mean, how a doctor became a teacher?
She was the first woman doctor in Italy. And earlier to that, she wanted to be an engineer. But that was a man's field, and her father didn't think it was the right thing to do. So she joined medicine. Even then, she was the only girl in the college. But she stood by and went. So she had I feel, a scientific bent of mind, And so then after she graduated to be a doctor, the first lady doctor in Italy, she was also advocating women's rights. She was also talking about peace in the world and how that has to come in. Then she was invited because she was a doctor, she was invited to observe children who had difficulties. At that time, they were called mentally deficient children. And when she worked with them, she made them sit for an exam. She felt they had improved. So she made them sit for a common exam with children who were so-called normal. So when they sat for that exam, they did as well or even better than the children who were normal. And so she said that these are mentally deficient children in that language, and so they can't do better than normal children. If normal children are doing worse, then something seems to be wrong with their education. They're being underestimated, or they're limiting them to this kind of a level. So something seems to be wrong there. So she wanted to work with normal children to see and look at education of what is going wrong there. That they were so badly educated that they were doing worse than or as bad as the mentally deficient children. So that hit her quite badly. And then she was invited to work with the children in a slum to set up a school for them. So then she thought maybe this is an opportunity. So that school, not a school really, it was like a daycare center, because it was in a slum, and they found that it was a new tenement building and all the parents were working and the children were left loose here. They wanted somebody to take care of the children and to set up something for them. So that was on January 6th, 1907, when she started this. And that was a day of, in Christianity, day of Epiphany. That's a day of kind of a revelation. So she felt that maybe it was a coincidence, but maybe these children will reveal something to us. Will show us something wonderful. And in her speech on that day, she said something to that extent. So that was in a way a kind of a profound, maybe, a mystical kind of answer, message to her.
Yeah.
And somehow that happened. Just that one school, I feel that we can see how much small things also affect, and at a large scale. So there she also talks about not what not the usual things about curriculum, this, that, and what she saw in the children as she was observing. I mean, thinking of herself as a scientist, she said, I have to observe children. I have to learn from them. I don't know what is. So that, she said, that pattern of observing children, learning from them, and then setting a curriculum. She didn't start with some theory.
So it came from the children.
So one of the revelations there was, I'm using that same word in a sense, all the material used to be locked up, which is normal. Okay, children are there, we lock up, give it to them. So that was a practice being done. She had a kind of a teacher who was not professionally trained or anything like that. She was who would take care of children. So she would tell her what to do, and she would ask her to report back to her, and she would also go for observations. So one day, the children, the lady hadn't come, so the children opened that cupboard and took all the material and started working with them. We call it work in a sense, because very often I see people calling it play all the time. Play is kind of looking down on children, But if you give even a thread to a young child or a small, object, they are absorbed in it. That's work for them. So from the child's point of view, if you see, it's work. Because they're using all their faculties. It's not just some play. So if you think they're playing, then you can disturb them anytime. You can say, when they were absorbed in that, we say, come, let's go out, or come and have dinner. But if you think of it as work for the child,
then it's important.
So she found that, and then the lady who was in charge, she said all the children have robbed the material or taken away the material or something like that, she said. So when Montessori went to see, she found all the children were busy working with the material, whatever was there. So then she said, why am I locking it up? Let's put it out. So now from then on, Montessori and everybody puts the material out. And children choose. So that was the one revelation. And another revelation, I think, was, is how she sees things, So I think some bread and all that fell on the floor. There were crumbs. So the children went grabbing all the crumbs. So the other person said, look how greedy these children are. But what she saw was that children's hands needed work. They wanted to touch and feel something. So then she gave them a lot of textures, a lot of things to do. So that was without judging them, without having any value judgments, to look at children in a scientific way, really, and to see without any, bias. Otherwise, we have so many biases against children. To really trust them is so difficult for us. Another day she went to the terrace, took the children to the terrace. And then with some chalk, one child started writing, on the floor. Then all the children started writing. She said, imagine, that they all are writing. I didn't really teach them. She taught only how to trace letters. She showed them how they were. And from there, they were writing. And Montessori gave due credit to people whom she learned from.
Okay. So you got a broader idea that how she got into this. Now, coming back to Schoolscape. A Schoolscape is a place or a center which is for the educators, where you basically do the training program for individuals to become a teacher in Montessori. Why you didn't start at a school instead of a center for educators?
See, I felt I didn't want to start a school because there were enough schools. I didn't want to have my own children because I feel there are enough children in the world. But you have to take care of what is there. Who's there to take care? How teachers are always asking, I don't know about this. Schools are asking for teachers. So I felt the right thing to do to reach out to more children is to start a teacher training program. And I was doing it naturally when I was even in the Krishnamurti school. Visitors came, I used to orient them about Krishnaji's philosophy or Montessori or, all the time in a training mode. So I felt that was also to share. I feel I had the opportunity or the fortune to work with masters as such, starting from Vaitarna in Annamalai to J. Krishnamurti, not working with him, but being under that umbrella. And others also, David. So I feel I can't hold it to myself, I have to share that. And school again is, I had that experience in Abacus of setting it up. I feel that's enough, yeah.
So Montessori is all about involving children in doing activities and learning from it, right? So how does this material really help in their cognitive development?
The other thing to that other question also of learning, I feel working through their hands and that imbibing into the cognition is for one stage of development. For the next stage of development, hands are not that important. Their reasoning mind is important. Imagination is important.
That is after a certain age?
6 to 12 years old. So that's where we have to engage them through that. So I feel materials help in the first stage because they need to touch and hold, and hands help them to think. So that is one area. It reaches the cognition. And we can expand a little bit on that. And for the next stage, for the elementary, for the 6 to 12, materials are also important because they are concretized abstractions. You can't imagine everything. You have to touch the river near you, or the tree near you to imagine the Amazon forest. Yeah. Without touching the tree next to you, you can't imagine that. So I feel that material creates that. And also this material is not just, it is dead and useless if the teacher does not breathe life into it. So we have to again present it to the child so that the child can see what is possible in the material. And then the child is left to discover more and more things. So it's a path of discovery. So the presentation that we offer to the child is like an introduction. So when we introduce them not just to learn the the concept in that, but they become friends. That material and the child become friends so that they learn the concept from there. There is a kind of a theory, say, that about core and periphery, an idea. So the core is of the human being is a secret kind of a human. It's a secret for that person. It's a secret for the child also. And there's a periphery around it. So the teacher's role is not to go to the core. That is that human being's own core. We should not invade that space. That is the child's work, and that is the individual's area. So we only offer to the periphery. And it's up to the child to take from the periphery to the core. That's not the adult's work, to go to the core. So that, what is the child's work, we have to leave to the child. We can't rob that child of that. Because that through that process, the child is constructing himself or herself. So if we take on the child's work, which is often we do, trying to explain to the child, instruct the child, then we're trying to go there. We're not allowing the child to work it out. So the materials, in a way, help the child to be independent learners. And you think of the classroom, there are so many materials for every concept. So there are 100 teachers in the class, not just the human teacher. Yeah. So that dependency on the adult teacher is not there. So they learn from the materials independently.
And can you talk a little bit about the principle of Montessori pedagogy?
Some things we've talked about. One is that the assumption that children are natural learners. And then to go to build on that, if they're natural learners, then we only have to create the environment where they can act. Not all the time to be acted upon. So then the adult's role is to create that environment and put the child in touch with that environment. That's a prepared environment. So if you see it as a tripod, the child, the environment, and the teacher, they have to be balanced, and the role of the adult is to put the child in touch with the environment, the other two sides of the tripod. Then the learning happens there, and that is one area. And that the prepared environment has to be, what is the most beautiful natural environment that one knows, which helps the child to survive and live. So if you think of that, we can't even guess. Most people can't guess, but that's the womb. So Montessori says, what does the function of the womb? It nourishes, it protects, it stimulates, along with freedom. So within a boundary, of course, but within that boundary, there is freedom for the child. So we can't interfere. What can we do for a child in the womb? There's no interference. Yeah. The child has to grow as is. So that kind of those conditions have to be there in any environment that we prepare for the child. So that environment has to nourish, has to protect, has to stimulate, and the child has the freedom to within that environment. So if you see an environment for an elementary child, say, or an adolescent, all these conditions are there, but relevant for that age. So that's one more pillar of Montessori, that how a prepared environment needs to be. And that, of course, after that is the prepared teacher, adult, or guide. We call them guides, or not teachers, but we can also call the teacher, but not a regular teacher.
Yeah.
So that she realized that a prepared teacher is important right at the beginning, and so started training. And I feel Montessori training started right when soon after she started CASA, that is Casa di Bambini. And they're the most structured training programs available for teachers. And that is one of the successes of, the Montessori pedagogy. We are struggling with this, say, in the democratic education world, where we are trying to train teachers for that. And it's so difficult because, to do it on a scale, do it on a regular way, and to create that democratic culture, that's so important. So Montessori, in a way, could do that. Saw that, how important it was, and created a training program.
So can you give any example of how this environment helps a child to learn?
So what is there in the environment? So let's look at that. One is everything is made for the child. So in a home there are many people living. So it's not only the child, and rightly so. So the environment is for all people. So you may not get a child-sized bed or a child-sized basin or anything. But you can make it helpful for the child to use it. But here, this is meant for the child. So we have to create an environment that is for the child. We say child is the center, but very often, if you see Anganwadis, government sectors, even the steps, they can't, not the child size. They have to crawl on it, clamber over it. So why we're not thinking about the child? So the size and then the materials are there for the child. And they're all open. And the teacher also is prepared. So that's the environment. And children can move around freely. So what happens is, say the child at 2.5, when they come into a preschool, they're eager to learn. And they've mastered two things when they've come there. So they've mastered movement. They can walk and run around. And they can speak. That language also, till what they can do, they're kind of perfect. They can communicate themselves, most of them. And what they want to communicate, they can. So they've mastered movement and they've mastered speaking. But when they come into a preschool or an Anganwadi, what are they told to do? They're told to sit quietly, not move, not speak. So that's so much aggression on the child. And that is violence. That what they have mastered on their own, nobody has taught them these two things. But if we are not allowing them to do that, that's a crime against children. And also the message then is that whatever you learned by yourself is no use here. Only what I teach you. So the children immediately stop learning. So I feel in a Montessori environment, children are moving, children are talking to each other. Otherwise, how does language develop? How does a language get enriched? Unless they speak to each other. So they're speaking to each other, they're speaking to the teacher, they're speaking to, their parents when they come in. So that's not trampled upon. And they're moving around. So all this helps the child to feel comfortable. And everything is made so that the child is autonomous. That's also kind of recognized. That the child is maybe little, but they're a person unto themselves. So we don't push and pull them and all that. We don't drag them to the bathroom. When they want to go, they go. We help them to see how they can be independent. So initially show them the way. So they feel comfortable. So here in your home, if you have a small chair, the child will go and sit on that chair. And imagine for us, if everything is so huge and we have to clamber all the time to sit on a chair, or to wash our hands. So the child feels comfortable. So that comfort leads to learning. They feel it's my environment. Otherwise, all the time they feel it's not for them. We always say, don't touch, because our homes are made for us. And if a young child is there, they want to touch things. And even for the older children, say that adolescents, I'll jump to the next phase, not the elementary, but adolescents, Montessori called them like Erdkinder, children of the land. Erd means earth. So they need to work on land. So from 12 to 18, so working on the land is supposed to help them. I mean, every stage you need it, but here the learning itself is based on land, and the subject and the topics that they cover come from their work with land, work with economic projects, and their studies evolve from there. So if they don't work with land, that's the environment for the adolescent, where they see that's a creative power, it's a creative stage in their life. So they need to see creation, and so they get that balance amongst themselves. They see something dying, they see it coming alive, they're working with plants, with animals. That's the environment that is right for them. So for the elementary child is also another kind of environment. So all these environments nourish, protect, and stimulate.
Coming to this understanding, they have their own environment where the environment itself stimulates learning. Now, how we will understand that they are really learning? I mean, in the mainstream or in the traditional system, there are tests, there are grades, and there are red pens like going across the exercise books, which says ki you have done well. There are grades, numbers, percentile, so many things. What is there in Montessori?
If I can say that in one word, it's observation. So we observe children. We know what they're intrinsically involved with, what they're interested. We know what they're capable of on a day-to-day basis. We know what they're struggling with. So we don't really need tests, to know that. Even a regular teacher doesn't need a test to know. She knows. But you want to show it to somebody else. You want a proof. You want evidence. So then you have all these tests. But learning is so amorphous and so deep that these tests really don't test their learning. They test the surface level facts and all that. So we have to accept that. If you want to test, do the test. But this is not really testing learning. So some things can be made, for evidence, for keeping track of children, for the government monitoring system. So do that. I mean, I feel there's nothing wrong with that. And but realize that it's not really, children know much more than that. So when we did that, I did this learning outcome study in Baraich and Balrampur in UP. The children in the school, what they were supposed to learn in school, they hardly knew anything. So 5 plus 2, they did not know. But when I showed them shopping things, reading the clock, time, and agriculture things, what they had lived through, they knew so much. But what is the school giving a test on? Only on what they have taught. And they've taught is so minimal, so little. And the children know so much. Yeah. So I feel don't make a big issue of tests and things. Have it if required. Even in Mandara, where we were working with the working children. So once the children asked us, how don't we have exams and all that? Because there was an exam season at that time. So we said, yeah, if you want, we can have. So they were so excited, that they're going to have exams. So we set a date and we said we'll have exams. parents were also excited, and they bought them this examination pad and a pencil and nice sharpener and all that. So to feel proud, that I'm also a student for these working children was a big thing. So what we prepared for them was, for say Tamil, about 5 question papers. So every child could do well. So we know their levels, So we gave the question papers according to them, to their level. And so they all did well. They all got in the 80s. So then that's what we did, So they felt proud doing an exam. And I think one of the photos shows that. And they were so seriously doing it. So what's the big problem?
Yeah. It's basically for the satisfaction of others and records nothing
We
else.
realize that, okay, children have to do some tests sometime. Let them do. They'll be part of it. And don't take it so seriously. And children also then won't. They'll enjoy it.
So let's move on. And there is something in Montessori method which we often hear. It's called follow the child. Hannah, can you explain what exactly does it mean?
Well, first is to have a knowledge of how children are. What are their needs at different stages. Not only academic, but social, emotional, spiritual also. So even if you take, say, spiritual, since I said that, a young child, 3 to 6-year-olds, enjoys being quiet. We don't think so, but they like to be quiet. So we have something called a silence activity, And then older children, we can do meditation, can do yoga, for whatever stage. So I feel that is to follow the child, to first know what children are about, other not from our whims and fancies. We have to study that. And there's so much knowledge in the last 100 years of how children are and how children learn, how children behave. Not all of it is, in a sense, we can't take everything as a truth or as God's given truth. But there is work done. And Montessori itself has a lot of research done on how children are. And I think if we observe, we can follow the child. In a sense of, in our training, what we do, we give presentations. We say it's at a particular age, 2.5 to 3, 4.5 to 5. We give that range, that this is when a presentation is usually given. But suppose a child, once in Abacus it happened, a child was not working with the number rods, So when I saw him and the teacher told me what to do with this per child. So I observed him for a bit, and then I gave him something challenging, jumping over 2 things. And then he got so excited, And I feel that is following the child in a sense. And then he went back to this number rods and did it also nicely. When you observe, you see what the child is. There was another child who was not interested in maths. I saw him. If the math shelf was here, he would go the other way. He wouldn't even go near the shelf. So I asked him one day, and he was about 8 years old. And I said, how come I don't see you working with maths? You can have a conversation like this with children. And he said, no, I'm afraid of it. He was very good at climbing trees. So I told him, you can climb this big tree. How come you're afraid of these maths, this material? I said, let's try. Let's see what you're afraid of. So let's do it together. So I challenged him a little bit and gave him that support. And after that, he did so well. So we understand the child, but we have to help them overcome certain things also. To get to that fear, we have to notice what is under the surface. Not just plainly, blindly follow. Like once we had a teacher coming to us and I said, what will you do, next week? She said, taking it literally, I'll follow whatever the child does, I'll do. But you're the adult in charge. You have to realize that you're the authority, so to say. You don't have to be authoritarian, but you're the authority for the children and you have to help them. Otherwise, you're abandoning them, So follow the child doesn't mean abandoning them or abandoning their needs. Many instances like this. Say like I was in a residential school in Ooty. Their levels were very low. They were hardly reading, writing. Maths, they were couldn't do much. So then I brought out books for them, because they were already 8, 9-year-olds and didn't know 1 to 10 also. So then I was giving books because I knew their levels. I had worked with them. So I gave books to everybody. One child I did not give. I wanted him to come to me. And so finally he came. Because he was different, he knew what he was capable of and not. He should have been in class 4. Then he came to me quietly and said, what book should I take? I said, start with book 1. You can go quickly if you want to. I said, don't worry about others. So he got that confidence that he can work with book 1 and go up to book 4 slowly. So then he became, we had that mixed age group, but that diffidence was there to help him jump over that.
So now we will come to some of the misconceptions that we have regarding the Montessori methods. And this part I really Googled and I found out that there are a pretty number of things that are that comes under the misconception thing. So I will name some of them and you can just then talk about that. So for example, people say that Montessori is for the wealthy family. It's quite costly. There is another point which says it is solely for the young children. It says that it doesn't prepare children for the traditional education. There is one thought which says that Montessori is anti-technology. And often we hear that Montessori is also outdated. So what is your take on all these misconceptions? Are they really misconceptions or?
Let me start with the anti-technology.
Okay.
Since we are living in a technical world, so to say.
Yeah.
See, I feel technology is what is technology? It's a pen is a technology. A notebook is a technology. Whatever we have made and manufactured and made with our hands is a technology. And India has been technically oriented or technologically oriented right from many years ago, thousands of years. So if you see how they made a plow, it's such a well-crafted thing that it works so well, for all these years. I think foreigners came and tried to saying this is inefficient, and they made a steel plow. And that within days it was grazing the cow's neck and, burning a scar, making a scar on the bullocks. So it didn't work. So people think, okay, it's fantastic, we'll do something. But somehow Indians have been, and now of course they say jugaad and all that, So that's there in our blood. And just IT is not the only technology that is there. And I don't think Montessori, with all the materials that it has, there's so much material there that it's easy to get into any kind of technological work.
In fact, it's high-tech in that sense. Yeah.
So, but what is the Montessori thinking in a way is that a child's mind has to be developed before it has to get into gaming or, and using computers only for that. So to use it effectively, to use it for a function rather than just for entertainment or for consumption or that. So I feel that's the way for anything, for food also.
Yeah.
To have a way with food, to eat food rationally, to eat when one is hungry. That's also in a way a technological kind of attitude. So if you see, even one of my cousins, he was one of the forerunners of IT in India. He didn't give his children, he felt till 12 years old, children should not be given this kind of mobile phones or at that time laptops. He said, let them start thinking, develop their thinking, their logic, their reasoning, and then let them use it. What I found was that I feel a computer should be kept, laptop or whatever, should be kept in the classroom. Use it for searching for something and let that be there. That's one more material. It doesn't have to be hidden. You don't have to have a computer room, etc. It should be one of the things in the classroom at the elementary level.
Okay. What about the other misconceptions? Like, it's for the wealthy family, it's quite costly.
It is costly. It has been made so because of its material dependence. But we've done it in government schools, we've done it in slum areas, we've done it in rural areas. If you want to, it can be done. I mean, I think I gave the example of...
Yes. Yeah. Okay. What about it's solely made for young children, which is not at all, I don't think so.
Not at all. I mean, earlier there was training only for the pre-primary.
Yeah.
So then there were only pre-primary Montessori schools. But we brought in more elementary training programs. So now there are more elementary schools. And adolescent programs, training programs are coming in. So now there are a few adolescent environments now. It's outdated? I don't think so. I mean, it was at one time, I felt. Because there was new thought coming in. Maybe that was in the 80s or so, till then, because there was a repetition. But Montessori is in a way classic, It, you can go back to it all the time and you're always finding something. It's like classical music or, like that. It doesn't go out of fashion or in fashion.
Yeah.
The principles are sound. In fact, Montessori didn't want to be called after her or even called a method. She said, this is what we have seen of children. So we don't call gravity Newton's gravity or something like that. It is gravity.
Yeah.
So this is how children are. It's an observation, that we have to accept. And many pedagogies take from her because she's done so much work in that. And it's amazing the kind of, if you see each material and each idea, every principle in Montessori, there's a practice for it.
Yeah.
And every practice, there's some philosophy to it, So there's so well structured. And within that, there's a flexibility for the teacher. I feel that creativity comes when you work with children.
Yeah. What about the misconception which says it doesn't prepare children for the traditional education? For example, if a child wants to switch from Montessori to a mainstream school, he or she will have difficulties. What do you have to say?
See, the kind of difficulties they have. I mean, children have come back and reported. They can't read their textbook by themselves. Only when the teachers turn the page, they have to turn the page. Otherwise they would read their book in 2 days. And so that limiting thing, or going to the toilet, they have to ask permission. I mean, these are horrible things, like, humiliating, and for what? And they can't talk to people, they can't talk here, there. So those are the things. Academically, they do wonderfully well because their basics are sound in all the subjects. And sometimes we tell parents, not to take children out when they just started writing. Because we're following a method or a way of doing things, and phonetically. So if they go to a mainstream school and they don't do it phonetically, they get jumbled, and that takes some time to, get a thing. So wait till that writing happens for the young child. Elementary, they can move anytime they're old enough, and if parents tell the school, there's always a time for preparation. Depending on which school they go to.
And how about the criticism that Montessori lack addressing diversity and inclusivity? I mean, is there a way to ensure that Montessori environment are more inclusive towards diverse backgrounds, children?
I think just by itself, it allows a diverse kind of children from different levels of learning or different economic backgrounds can be part of it. And we look for variety. So every class, usually we take 2 or 3 children with difficulties. And some crop up like that, even without, because we don't test children really for them to be part of the school. So some children, because 10% of the children in the child population now seems to have learning difficulty, something or the other. So that surfaces. And I think the Montessori approach helps those children to do well. Because mainly motor coordination is there.
Yeah.
They can walk about. Sometimes for autistic children, experts have told us that a whole class moving about, all that may disturb them. So we were advised to put the child facing the wall. So the child doesn't get distracted or disturbed by that, but he's alone. He or she is alone. So there are small things like that we can do. Or we bring in a dyslexia expert who works with the children as they work. They don't have to go another extra class to work with for dyslexia. A teacher who's trained can come in.
Okay. So after hearing the podcast, say for example, one individual find Montessori really very interesting. He or she can be an individual, a parent, an adult, someone who runs a school, someone who wants to open a learning center. What should be their next step?
I feel first is they should go observe a school, so that they know what it is.
Montessori school.
I mean, hearing me talk is one thing, reading is another. But seeing for themselves and seeing how it works and the magic of it, I feel, and whether it suits them or not.
So Montessori schools allow anyone to come and observe?
Yes, usually.
Usually. Okay.
That too, we have made it like that, helped people to do. And I feel after that, if they want to be prepared a little more, I feel do a training course. And a training course can be to be a teacher, can be a full diploma course, or it can be like an audit course where a parent may come in and do only 60% attendance. Or it can be, a participatory kind of a thing where they don't do any exams or don't do any albums, but they just want to listen in. Yeah. So we have 3 kinds of certificates.
Okay. And this is, you are talking under Schoolscape, or this is common for all the Montessori training?
This we have for Schoolscape. Yeah. Hopefully others should also have.
Yeah. And
teacher, parent, etc. The others also, they can create their own environments, no? But after training.
So training is important. Because
that's because that spiritually prepared adult is important.
Yeah.
Even when teachers come in for our training, we help them to look at their own childhood experiences of school, so that they have to shed it. Otherwise, without shedding it, they're going in, they carry that bias with them. Because school is such a strong structure in our minds that to look at it objectively is difficult.
So can you give a little more a brief about, because I think the teacher training part in Montessori is quite important. So can you throw a little bit of light about what kind of molding or remolding the training does to an individual?
Not molding. I feel it's like a transformation process where we're reflecting on our work, what we have gone through, our experiences, and looking at our biases. So, also, we've learned things so badly that every material which we demonstrate, it's a new learning. So they said, oh, I never knew that, for simple things like, place value of tens, 10 is our base of our system. It's not a conscious learning. So all that becomes conscious and they never know the reason why we do things. So here they understand the reason. Because you're talking to an adult learner, so you have to use principles of andragogy also. Not just pedagogy is for the children, andragogy is for the adults. So how do adults learn? We have to make it meaningful for them. I feel that is important, and that is through analysis, reflection, knowing more about things. And it touches them.
Yes.
And though we do it online, we create that environment even in the online class, that they can ask questions. We work with trust. We work so that they collaborate, all that. It's not always with suspicion and mistrust and humiliating, which is a normal learning environment in schools, colleges, and universities also.
Yeah. And let's also underline the fact that Montessori is not only about primary or for kids below standard 5 or something like that. It also has an elementary course. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know many people, when I talk to them, when I say them that Montessori is also for children who are above standard 5, they say, oh, I never heard of it. बिकॉज मेरे बचपन में तो मैंने सिर्फ सुना था कि बच्चे जाते हैं स्कूल के शुरुआत में मॉन्टेसरी में, तो मॉन्टेसरी हैज़ ऑलवेज बीन केप्ट इनटू दैट ब्रैकेट कि बिफोर स्कूल स्टार्टिंग गो टू मॉन्टेसरी देन गो टू स्कूल. So can you break that barrier?
I mean, people are right in one way because there've never been that kind of a training and it has just started. 2008 was the first elementary course which I helped to bring in to India. And from then on, we've been having elementary training programs and it is becoming popular now. So, but in the world also, there were very few. When in 2008, when we started, there were only 7 trainers in the whole world at this age, for this stage.
But Maria Montessori, during her visit, she trained elementary.
Yes, she trained at that time.
Then what happened? It vanished?
Yeah, it disappeared. I mean, Rishi Valley followed it for some time because the teachers who were trained in Kodaikanal moved to Rishi Valley and some other schools had it. But after they went away, there was no training conducted. Because there were no people who are qualified. Then AMI came into the picture, Association Montessori International. So you have to become a qualified trainer to train. So that's a long process and takes money and time, etc.
So 2018, the elementary course, 2008, sorry. Yeah. 2008, the elementary course was first introduced to India. And you were instrumental in that. Okay, wonderful. Okay. So yeah, please continue on that elementary thing.
So in the elementary course, if you understand the children at that age, they have a reasoning mind, they have that imagination, they want to discuss, they want to collaborate. So the training also in a way is that, where the pre-primary is more prescriptive. Here there is an exploration and it's just if you see the teachers in both the courses, we run both the courses. The students themselves are different because we have that kind of a climate, and they see the needs of the children, they adapt to that. So elementary course is very exciting because we are doing all the subjects from class 1 to 8 in zoology, botany, geography, history, and in a Montessori way, which is not linear, but it is cyclical or it is goes according to the psychology of the child. So for time activities, for instance, we do, the minute first, and then along with it the second. Then we jump to a day, and then we do a week and the month and all that. And then go back to reading the clock. So it is what the child psychology is required. And that is one. The other is the elementary child needs to be part of the learning, for part of the outer, bigger, wider environment. So there's a program called Going Out. So children need to go out for their studies, whatever they're studying on. Suppose they're studying about leaves, they need to go talk to an expert on leaves and then discuss, research, do some further study and write their own projects. So going out is a big part of the elementary school and in the Montessori elementary school. And the training too, we incorporate that.
And do they follow any syllabus while going towards the 10th exam?
This covers the syllabus up to class 1 to 8. So if they go into class 8 or 9, they can follow that and they know deeper things. Academics is no issue because we do much more than general. Montessori has its own curriculum. Yeah. If there are some gaps here and there, sometimes maybe on, in history, some small bit is not done, which is supposed to be done in class 5. We can easily give it to the child and say, do it, and they will read it themselves, they'll do their own study. So, because self-learning is taught as part of.
Yeah, so they can pick up anything. By the time they reach class 8, 7, they can pick up anything.
They're learners.
Yeah. Okay, so now coming to the end, the last question that I have is a kind of advice or message from your side that you would like to give to the parents or the educators who want to understand Montessori or they want to incorporate Montessori in their home, in their classroom, in their centers. How they can go forward, or what is the message for them?
I feel, first of all, loving your children is enough. That's more than enough. If you have affection and love and you have that, I feel, express that. Very often we don't express that love for children and don't tell them enough. I feel that's more than enough. The other is, try not to be a teacher in the house. Be yourself, be a mother, be a father. Otherwise, there's too much instruction going on in a child's life. In the school they're instructed, and at home also all the time, do this, do that. Where is the conversation? So have conversations with children. I feel that's wherever you are, whether at home or even in school, teachers, please have a conversation with children. And they're capable of that. And the other is, are we listening to children? Because suddenly when they grow up and they're not telling you some things, and when they hit adolescence, they become secretive in a way. Because they don't know what's happening inside them. It's not that they don't want to tell you, Because if you compare it to, like, say, a butterfly, the chrysalis, adolescence is like that chrysalis stage. We don't know what's happening inside. So children themselves don't know. So before they hit adolescence, you should be in a conversation with them and able to listen to them, they listen to you, in that way. I feel that's the most important thing.
Wonderful. So we have come to a very enlightening episode on the Nomad podcast, and I would like to thank you, Amudi, for being so patientful for the last 2.5 hours we have been recording this podcast. And I hope the listeners will get a good idea about Montessori, the method and the pedagogy. And still, if you have any kind of doubt, question, you can always reach out. We will provide some kind of details about Amukta and also about Schoolscape in the details of the podcast. So thank you once again, Amudi, for being with us today, and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Saurav.